The ending of Netflix's zombie horror Outside takes the tired trope of zombies not being the true monsters and applies it to a very dark and personal topic, domestic abuse. Outside follows the struggling Abel family as they return to Francis, Sid Lucero, childhood home to weather the zombie apocalypse. As it progresses, Iris, Beauty Gonzalez, expresses her desire to leave the house and take their sons, Josh, Marco Massa, and Lucas, Aiden Tyler Patdu, to a military camp. Francis, however, has other ideas, quickly becomes the real source of his family's fear, and turns Outside into one of the best horror movies on Netflix. In the final act of Outside, Francis' abuse over his family both escalates and begins to unravel. After Korkura and Chong-di arrives and dispels his lies, Josh leaves the house to find help. Francis locks his family in the room he was abused in as a child, and he begins making even more irrational decisions. He kills and cooks the dog that raided the chicken coop, he stole Korkura's uniform and began wearing it, and he had some of his worst flashbacks to when his father used to abuse him. So much happened so quickly at the end of Outside that an explanation may be in order. Why Francis killed the soldier and took his uniform. Francis, Sid Lucero, swinging a hammer at Korkura and Chong-di in Outside. Almost everything Francis did in Outside was for one reason, to maintain his abusive control over his family. He accomplished that in a number of ways, from violence to emotional abuse, but his biggest weapon was his ability to lie. After the soldier, Korkura, arrived, he began talking about the outside world. He told the family about Delta Camp, the settlement Josh heard about on the radio, how few zombies were still around outside, and Diego, James Blanco, Francis' brother, who he claimed had already died. Korkura dispelled all of Francis' biggest lies, and since he felt like he was losing control, Francis killed him. Francis' lies about the outside world were the main reason his family remained at the house. Iris would have demanded they leave for Delta Camp if Francis hadn't lied about the van being broken down and dismissed what Josh heard on the radio. Korkura, however, took that avenue of control away from Francis, so he had to resort to another method, violence. Killing Korkura was both a way to stop him from exposing Francis' lies, but it also served as a warning to Iris. If he could bash an innocent man's head in with a hammer, there's no telling what he would do to her. One of the more confusing parts of Korkura's murder was the fact that Francis stole his uniform and wore it himself. That, however, was also a desperate bid for control. Lucas had carried his soldier action figure around everywhere, and Francis even mentioned that the toy would protect him. The reason Francis stole Korkura's uniform was because he desperately wanted Lucas to see him as a protector. He had already done so much harm to Iris and Josh by that point, however, that Lucas would never see his father as a source of safety again, so Francis tried to become his action figure. Why did Francis start helping his family again at the end of Outside? Francis, Sid Lucero, wearing a soldier's uniform and covered in blood in Outside. Despite the fact that Francis was quickly becoming more abusive and unhinged, in the final moments of Outside, he began helping his family again. When the zombified Diego attacked, Francis was locked in the basement, reliving the trauma of his childhood abuse. Iris and Lucas' screams, however, were enough to snap him out of it and spur him to action. Then, after Iris had to amputate Lucas' bitten arm, Francis realized that he needed to be a caring father again if he wanted his favorite son to live. So, for a brief moment, Francis prioritized his family's safety over his need for control. There were a few other reasons Francis may have started helping again. One of the biggest reasons may be because he broke down the door to the basement he was abused in. That room had a lot of significance to Francis. Almost every time he entered it he had a panic attack and relived his childhood trauma, and being able to escape it may have helped him resolve his past trauma. Once he did, he may have been in a better mental state to help his family and realize how much he had harmed them. It's also important to note that while none of Francis' actions or abuse can be excused, he is also a victim. Francis probably never wanted to become an abuser, but victims of abuse are 6 times as likely to become abusers, via the Office of Justice programs. In a way, the lingering effects of Francis' father's abuse lasted long after Francis became an adult, as Francis essentially became the man he despised so much. Once he broke down the door, and once Lucas' scream snapped him out of it, Francis may have decided to let go of his father's hold on him. The deeper meaning behind Francis' watch in Outside explained. Francis' watch with a drop of blood on it at the end of Outside. After Josh shot and killed Francis on the bridge, the last time Outside showed the father was by closing in on his watch. When they first arrived at the house, Francis had taken the Rolex off his own father's corpse, and he began wearing it as his own. The watch got special attention throughout Outside, and almost always after Francis did something abusive, like slamming his fist on the table or smacking Josh across the face. Francis' watch is a symbol of the cycle of abuse he was trapped in. His father wore it while abusing him, and Francis wore it while abusing his own family.